Good morning, everyone. Today, I'd like to talk about how to set your dog up for success in recall. Recall is a pretty important skill, and at some point, it might actually save your dog's life. So, I'd like to share some strategies and concepts that have worked pretty well here for our client dogs and our own dogs. So, number one, an ounce of prevention is worth hours and hours of training. A long line is going to be your best friend as you teach your dog recall, simply because it prevents your dog from making mistakes. And a dog who can ignore a recall and dash off into the world after a squirrel, that moment of chase and running after whatever critter it is so exciting for your dog and so reinforcing, it can literally wipe out months of training. So what you're going to do if you want to be successful is you're going to leave your dog on the long line and practice lots of recalls. And you want to leave them on until you think that you have a pretty good chance of calling them back when they come off the leash. And at that moment, what I want you to do is leave them on the long line for another 6 to 8 weeks. Because humans are always too optimistic about this stuff. So play it conservatively, leave them on, you will thank me for that. So the next step is what we call one step at a time is all that it takes to get you there. And what happens a lot is people try to practice their recalls in the situation out in the world. So taking your dog to a dog park and letting them run free with the other dogs, chances are your dog is not going to come back when you call them. Chances are actually pretty good. Similarly, if you've got your dog out there, maybe they're on a long line, but they're 50 or 100 feet away and they're out there considering their options, if you call them back from that distance, again, chances are pretty good that they're not going to come back. So what you'd like to do is bring them back in. Start at a distance at which your dog can be successful, which could be as short as 10 or 15 feet away. So if your dog's 10 or 15 feet away from you and they happen to look at a neutral distraction that doesn't pull them into engagement, say your dog's at that distance and they happen to glance over at a recycling box, that's the perfect moment to do a recall. And it's simple, the dog is going to come back, you'll be able to reinforce them, you're starting to build that reinforcement history. So start it where your dog can be successful on simple things at close distances. And then when your dog has a lot of success, you can start to build the distance in tiny increments, and you can start to up the level of the distractions. You want to do it so that your dog doesn't even realize they're being more challenged. So just tiny, tiny steps will get you to the end a lot faster. I want to look now at the role that the human plays in recall. And we play a pretty important role in our dogs' lives. The big question is, how can we become how can we become the person that our dog wants to come back to? Well, there's a few ways to achieve this. Number one, think about this. You get what you pay for. So often I see people calling their dogs back from distractions in the world and giving them one cookie. One cookie doesn't even begin to compete with or provide enough value for what they've just left behind. What one cookie will do is teach your dog that humans are cheap and stingy. It can also teach your dog to become a grab and go dog. And by grab and go dog, I'm talking about the dogs who know they're coming in, they're going to get one cookie, so they come flying in, they grab their cookie, and then they head back out to the good stuff. And you don't want a grab and go dog. The answer is to throw a party for your dog. So you're going to go out and find some reinforcement that is absolutely fabulous for your dog. And it has to be your dog's decision on what's fabulous, not yours. So go out and get that fabulous reinforcer, bring it home, take a couple of pieces and cut them into smaller pieces. So the next time your dog comes back, instead of handing them 1 or 2 big pieces, you're going to have 10, 15, 20, 25 tiny pieces. And you're going to feed them to your dog one at a time. You can throw them on the ground, you can toss them in the air, you can feed them directly from your hand. It doesn't matter. And the whole time you're doing it, you're going to be telling your dog what a fantastic dog he was for coming back. So all of those tiny little pieces fed over time are going to have and your excitement are going to have a much bigger impact on your dog than handing them one single piece. The next strategy I want to talk about is using your voice. And people sometimes tend to get a little authoritative, a little commanding, a little stern about their recalls, especially if the dog doesn't come back at the beginning. If they don't come back on the first recall or they're coming too slowly, we tend to start saying, Maddie, here, come now. And nobody wants to come back to a voice like that. Our dogs are very sensitive to reading our emotions through those voices, so they might actually think we're angry or upset about them if you use that kind of voice. My dog Rosie has a fantastic recall, probably almost 100%, but she comes back to a voice that I find embarrassing to use. It has to be quite high pitched and it has to be quite happy. And I'm not going to demonstrate it here, but I don't care out in the world how that sounds because I know it brings her back. And she knows that I am happy and excited when I call her for her to come back. So the last strategy is one of my favorites to talk about. I call it turn that frown upside down. And we've all been in this situation. You've been calling your dog for the last 20 minutes. Your dog has suddenly gone deaf. And finally, you have to chase them down and grab them. And at that point, you're thinking, what do I do? Do I scold them? Do I shout at them? Do I tell them they're a bad dog? Do I put them in the house in a crate and leave them there for a timeout? It's tempting to do some of those things because at this point we can't even pretend we like our dog or that we're happy with them. But what you need to think is that what you do in the next few moments is completely going to influence the success of your next recall. All right? It's not the dog's fault. Your dog didn't refuse to come back or didn't ignore you because they were being stubborn or being willful or disobedient or defiant. I'm willing to bet that your dog didn't come back because they haven't been provided with enough value in those previous recalls. It's just simply not worth their while to come back. So what you want to ask yourself in that moment is, what can I do to build value for the next recall so my dog does come back? And then you calmly put your dog on the leash. You haven't shouted at them. You haven't said anything. You're just going to calmly put them on the leash. And you're going to do a number of those short recalls that we talked about earlier so that your dog can successfully come back to you and you can throw one of those food parties for them. So you do a number of those short recalls, you reinforce heavily, and I'm willing to also bet that your dog will willingly come back to you the next time. It's science, and science has proven that if a behavior is reinforced, it is highly likely that behavior will be repeated in the future. If, however, a behavior is punished or not reinforced, chances are that behavior will disappear in the future. It's basic science, and our dogs deserve science.